Well, a fascinating discussion by the Vice President. I'm sure you will agree. Thank you so much for following up on that. And let's dive into some specific practices and learnings and how governments put in place efforts to promote efficiency and eliminate bureaucracy. And if I could, Huda, speak with you first and talk a little bit about some of the innovative things that the UAE is doing. We spoke about this a little earlier. This has been a long journey, not an instant effort by the UAE, but something you've really been working on for a while. So from your perspective in the UAE, being innovative and bringing that innovation to government, maybe you could tell us a little bit about how the UAE is doing that and what your focus points are.
So thank you for having me here on the panel, and welcome to the World Government Summit. Truly an honor to be amongst great panelists as well. As you mentioned, UAE has not been shy of bold initiatives. We've been innovating in public sector reform for the past 30 years. I mean, and every part of our journey has been led primarily and because we're fortunate to have visionary leaders. We have been very fortunate to have visionary leaders who've always pushed us to do better, and not to do better for the sake of doing better, but because the people deserve that. So if we were to look at what does public sector innovation mean and what does better mean, I think the standard always changes over the years, so the bar always raises. So when we started out, we looked at the ethos of quality and excellence to begin with. We then migrated into services, and how do we make services at the top of our agenda, digital transformation, and how do we all move all our services into the digital world. We also looked at fostering the culture of innovation, and that when we created 10 years ago a center that's just dedicated to doing that. But we then also looked at areas of regulation, and how can we actually adopt new regulations as well. So our journey has been a very exciting and fascinating one. And it all comes down to a quote that His Highness, our Prime Minister, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, reminds us of always, that a government that does not develop or innovate perishes. So for us, we take that very seriously. And for that, it means every year we need to sort of look at where we are. And I would sort of summarize our steps of our journey into maybe 5 main steps. The first one is having a very clear vision. A very clear vision and a very clear direction of where we're going. What's our North Star? What are we aiming for? What's the purpose of all of this? And we've been fortunate to have a vision that has been far-reaching. When we want to be celebrating our 100th anniversary, in 2071, we want to be the best country in the world, as simply as that. We want to have the best government in the world. And then what does that mean in reality? That seems very far-fetched. When we bring it down to reality, we then have concrete strategies and concrete sectorial strategies. We have a strategy for AI that was developed years ago. We have the first minister of AI back in 2017. So we look at concrete sectorial strategies that leads the way. But we're also obsessed with measuring. We're obsessed with measuring our targets and setting clear targets. And why is that important? Because we need to be agile. If things come our way, if a new technology breaks through, if something that's happening globally, do we just continue in the same path, or we pivot, or we are resilient enough to make those changes? So having a clear measurement is important. Also gives us a sense of where do we stand. Alhamdulillah, UAE government is ranked number 1 in over 224 global indices. But we're also ranked top 10 in over 1,000. And more importantly, areas that are important, such as trust, services, and bureaucracy. So then we come to ask, why are we working on bureaucracy if we're ranked the 2nd in ease of bureaucracy? It's mainly to do with the fact that the standards are constantly raising, and we always want to continuously compete.
Excellent. It sounds like you're really taking this on as a competition to be the best government and to focus on eliminating bureaucracy. We'll come back to that in a moment, that competitive spirit in service of that. One thing I wanted to point out and bring
The first economic process is tourism. We receive more than 11 million of tourists in the country each year, only behind Mexico in the whole Latin America. So, when the president take charge in 2020, he established how we can protect and how we potentialize this sector in order to be a more efficient, more security, and more guarantees for the investors. We have in the Dominican Republic more than 16,000 bedrooms, investment from all over the world, Spanish, US, French, Germany. So how we can establish a more efficient government in order to attract more foreign investments. So that was the path, and that was the main focus of the government in the first 4 years from 2020 to 2024. So we create a program named Zero Bureaucracy. Zero Bureaucracy is a program in which we identify the most occupy or the most impact entities that works in authorization process in the Dominican Republic, involving foreign investment, involving creating companies, involving making construction. So we identify all these entities, and we establish how we're going to prioritize all the process that they've done in order to reduce the time of all this process, at least for 50% of the time of the first 4 years. So we take sectors as construction, industry, tourism, technology, and we establish a new methodology of how the process has been made since the beginning to get let's say a permit, or to get any authorization in order to put some investment in the Dominican Republic. So thus we create a delivery unit named Zero Bureaucracy, and we start with a small team. We get some advertisers and some consultants from companies outside and consultants from outside the Dominican Republic. And now we have, after 4 years of working, we have achieved to reduce 50% of the time of all these permits in all these entities. And also, we have incorporated all a new infrastructure in data. Also, we have created a new cultural ecosystem, because at the beginning we have to work how to put in the public servants the idea that the main focus of the main goal of their jobs is to create more efficiency, be more transparent, and to be more agile in all the processing of the companies that works in the Dominican Republic.
Can I ask, how did you do that? How do you incent that and get that belief in your team?
With persistent determination. The president itself is involved in all this process, so it's like a permanent obligation. We are doing metrics also. We are putting goals, and we are the public servants who does the best, or the entities who does the best achievements in any of their area gets like a yearly bonus, and so we are trying to incentivize. Exactly.
That's great. Hood, I'd love to come back to you and talk a little bit about that and your approach. We talked a little bit about competition. Cutting bureaucracy by 50% must resonate with you. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the competition that you put in place for the UAE government in this way.
So just to give a bit of context, I mean, we also have a zero government bureaucracy program. But like I said, it wasn't that it came up a year ago. It was built over many, many years of work that happened with service improvement and so forth. But a year ago, His Highness announced that we want 3 main KPIs. We want to reduce all the procedures by 2,000 procedures across the whole of government. We want to cut down the time by 50% of all transactions, and we want to eliminate any form of duplication. And we gave them a year, and we developed a very concrete framework in that sense, and we got all of government to work together. But we also announced that we will be announcing the top 3 entities that did the most in cutting bureaucracy, and the 3 that did the least. 2 days ago, His Highness tweeted out the results, and we have some really interesting cases that came about this. So we had the Ministry of Justice that won the most in reducing bureaucracy because they focused on priority areas, and I think that's the key thing. You could cut a lot of procedures, but is it supporting businesses? Is it giving the highest impact to the people? Is it the right bureaucracy that you're cutting? We wanted all the efforts to go in the impact, because it's not about cutting costs, it's about value creation. And that's the perspective that we're seeing with bureaucracy. We can cut a lot of costs, we can cut a lot of processes, but if it's not creating value, it's not creating impact, then we need to ask ourselves, where is our energy going? And so for that, the Ministry of Justice focused on 31 high-value processes, and that's where they created things like the virtual judge, the virtual notary, so they disrupted in their areas. But we said it's not enough to just thank the entities, we need to thank the people. Because at the end of the day, who's working tirelessly on all the efforts? Who's really rallying up? Who are the teams that are behind the scenes? And that's what His Highness announced. He announced that he will award a 7 million dirham, which is close to $2 million award, to the teams that have been working tirelessly at night to really better lives in our country. And these teams worked on main things. We looked at high impact in economy, high impact in society, but equally about did they listen to the customer's needs, a category on that? Did they partner with businesses when they were inspired? Did they partner together? And also, which one was the people that went over and beyond in terms of humanity, in terms of really supporting out of their way? So that's what we happened, and yesterday was the award. And it's a continuous process. It's not just a one-time effort. Bureaucracy is constant, and the zeroing of it, in the Arabic word it's tasfir, it's because it's constant. You can't, and it's the audacity of the word is that it's so hard to achieve, but I think that's what we're working towards. Because standards, like I mentioned, is raising. People's expectations a year ago for passport was okay to get it in a week. A few months later, no, one day we need it in a one day. Today in UAE government, you get it in minutes, because that's what the expectations are rising. So that means even though we're doing amazing, the bar always needs to be risen higher.
Continuous improvement.
Continuous improvement.
If we could just wind back to that competition, what happened to the three groups that performed the worst in that competition? Were they the ones who funded the 7 million dirham payment to the winners?
You have to understand that in the UAE government, this is quite common. We've been doing that for years. His Highness has been informing, and it's not just about saying who's the worst, because actually in the past, those that did the least, in a year's time, became the most.
Right.
So it is a wake-up call. It's also to show transparency. It's also to show that we do need to work together. And it has happened in the past when we did announce some entities that weren't doing so great. They did transform, and they were actually one of the best as
So
well.
you shouldn't be shy of calling out that accountability.
No,
is really
it's
the key.
about improvement. It's not about shaming.
Great. We're almost out of time, but Minister Freund, I was hoping to come back to you and reflect on that a little bit again. And we just discussed, the two of you have never met before this
No.
panel, but you both are focusing on the agile government, cutting bureaucracy. I'm curious if you could comment on this as a movement. What did you use as your guidepost for developing this in the Dominican? And are you hearing more of this from other governments, not just in the U.S., with Doge, et cetera?
Exactly.
It sounds like Doge is catching on to what you both are already doing.
That's correct. As I mentioned before, we since the president was running for office since 2016, where he lost the first election, he created his policy of zero bureaucracy. Our president comes from the private sector. He's a very well-known entrepreneur for the tourism sector and the construction sector. So he was he understands exactly how all the investors in the Dominican Republic has to deal every day with all this process of bureaucracy to get any authorizations or permits. So that's why in the first 4 years, he focused on establishing a more efficient and transparent process for direct for foreign investment and local investment base. So as mentioned before, we established something like creating a corporation, a company in 24 hours. Before we get to office, we were doing 1 month, 45 days to establish a new corporation. Right now, we can create a corporation in the Dominican Republic just in 24 hours. That's the fastest in all the region. Also, how can we get a permit in environmental and doing a tourist permit in 30 days? Before we get to the government, we were dealing for a year, 2 years to establish. Right. So right now, since 2024, we are focusing on service based on citizens. How we gonna change the experience of the citizen with the government, and now we are focusing on 4 pillars. Let's say we name it zero trip. We are trying to in 2028 we should be. There's no way of all diligence and all the process can be made from office or from his house without going to an office or to an entity. Zero paper. We are doing all the signatures digitalized, so every authorizations, every process in the Dominican Republic can be made digitally. Zero burden. We are reducing again all this bureaucracy process, and in that phase, we are in the process of reducing the government size. The president has just announced, like 3 months ago, an initiative in which we are eliminating 3 ministries and 10 agencies. So to get the government more small, more efficient. And also we are the zero time. We are putting a goal that in 2028 we have to be one of the 10 most efficient governments in doing response to the citizenship. So all the permits. So we are going to have. Right now we are in the process of doing more agile the process of passports. National identity, we can have a passport in as soon as 8 hours, so we're doing great.
Maybe there can be a competition on
Exactly.
who's the fastest passport between the two of you. This is a fascinating discussion. I know we could go on for hours, but I wanted to thank you both for sharing some of your insights on how to build a more agile and efficient government. Thank you so much. Huda Al-Hashimi, Deputy Minister, Cabinet Affairs, UAE.